a session coming up now which is focused on the farming sector's contribution to providing a solution to the climate and nature challenges we face. We have got, just before we go into that, just to remind you that if you have questions, you can post them in the chat. If you want to ask your question in Welsh, those will be translated for you, but the answers may come in English. And all of the presentations and speakers' biographies can be found on the WOVA webpage. And all these sessions are being recorded, so you can watch them back afterwards. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce a session led by Hilary Kehoe, who is the chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. And she has with her Owen, who is a leading lighter in the Nature Friendly Farming Network and has experience from many years and an award winner of some fantastic nature on his farm. And also joining them is Chris Clark of Nethergill Associates, who is both a farmer himself but has done some fascinating work looking at the economics of hill farming and how we can live in more sustainable farming systems that work with nature. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Hilary to lead this session.
Hi everybody. I was going to start by introducing myself. Hi everyone, I was going to start by introducing myself. Katie's done it, but I'll say I'm chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in Wales. And the Nature Friendly Farming Network is a farmer-led independent organisation, and we've been going just 3 years, trying to unite farmers who are committed to managing their land for wildlife and the delivery of public goods, as well as growing and providing healthy, nutritious food. So we're a UK-wide organisation, and I'm just chair for Wales. I'm farming with my family near Bethesda in North Wales, and I work for PONT, Wales's grazing organisation. So welcome to the Wales Biodiversity Partnership Conference, and this session is called Farming, the Solution to Tackling the Climate and Ecological Emergencies We Are Facing, ? So Gethin and Chris are going to try and address that, and then I'm going to just have 10 minutes at the end on the Nature Friendly Farming Network manifesto and our key asks that we think will hopefully try and help to tackle the climate and ecological emergencies. So first of all, we've got Chris Clark, who's been farming at Nethergill Farm in beautiful Yorkshire Dales for the last 15 years, during which time he's developed and refined a nature-friendly and profitable way of farming. And here he is to tell you more about less is more.
Morning, everybody, and thank you very much, Hilary. Nature-based solutions is what I'm going to talk about, but overpinning the umbrella over that is balancing food, farming, and nature. And what I'm going to do this morning with you is show that there is an economic and conservation sweet spot where both conservation and farming come together and become robust and resilient and viable. It's an unusual concept where farming is better off working with nature than it is working against nature. So this is the farm where I used to own and manage. I sold it in July of this year, and on Monday next week I buy another farm in North Devon, closer to family, less rainfall, less height, and more grazing. So this is about 1,500 feet, and right at the top of Wharfdale, and 120 inches of rain. And it's the place where we learnt that the less stock you had within reason, the more resilient, more viable the business was, and the better nature was as well. And going on from that, over the last 2 years, I have virtually, or actually, sat round nearly 80 kitchen tables and analysed their accounts. And what you're going to hear this morning is a result of those 80 different farm businesses being analysed. The evidence is compelling, if not inarguable. So, every business, including a livestock farm, needs a business model. And the business model in farming affects both the farm business and conservation. What we'll find, and I will keep on repeating, that there is a sweet spot between those two things. But if we're going to have a business model, we need to understand the concepts that underpin that business model, and there are 6 of them. I'm only going to tackle 4 this morning. The MSO, maximum sustainable output, the point at which that sweet spot occurs between farm business and nature, the importance of understanding a managed landscape, the concept of free issue, and this buzz phrase or words, natural capital. There are 2 others, concepts that we use in analysing a business, ESI, environmental stress, and ROTA, return on total assets. We'll maybe come back to those another day. So in essence, a viable farm business will be in balance with nature. If it's not in balance, it will be unviable. And I repeat, every single one of the 80 farm businesses that we have looked at are exhibiting exactly the same characteristics. If you're not in balance with nature, your business is not resilient or viable. And apologies for this, but we needed to start off with some economics. This is the standard economic theory of the firm. This is what I was taught when I went to agricultural college. It is what is believed by national governments, by national institutions like the NFU, the Welsh NFU, the CLA, all those people. They all believe this, and it's based around this, that there is a standard economic theory of the firm where the green line reflects revenue, where the red line reflects a farm's fixed costs, and where the purple line reflects a farm's variable costs. And where the variable costs cross the revenue line, that is the break-even point, and beyond that is profit. And it is this concept, this approach to a business model, that has been driving farming since the Second World War. And what we're going to show you is that this does not work. So, let me just get this. So in this situation, the variable costs have a linear relationship with volumes and output. The more you drive production, the more margin you make. And this implies that there are economies of scale. The more you drive production, the more margin you make, is what is believed. This doesn't work. And nobody was more surprised than me to find this out when we started this analysis 18 months to 2 years ago. So what does work? Well, it's not the standard economic theory of the firm, it's the economic realities on the farm. Same chart, same revenue line, same fixed costs, but not the same variable costs. And they're not the same because this is what actually happens. So we have an inflection point. We do not have linear variable costs in farming. And in effect, we've got these what we've called PVCs, productive variable costs, and they're called productive because between this point here and the inflection point is where the variable costs are working with nature. And then between the inflection point and the point up here, we've got CVCs, corrective variable costs, and they are corrective because farmers try to drive production, and they try to do that by counteracting the disadvantages of elevation, precipitation, latitude, soil type. And the corrective variable costs, examples of those would be fertilizer, purchase concentrate, additional purchase forage, additional vet and med costs, overwintering. So there is this drive for production in the belief that we'll make more money. And what we found is that they may well go into a through the break-even point and make some profit, and they may well also then go out into this area here where they are losing money again. So the most profitable place to be is at MSO, this maximum sustainable output. If you are at this point in your farming business is at its most profitable, and actually, because you have reduced your stocking rate, your nature is benefiting as well. Also counterintuitively, if your stocking rate is too few, you're also causing problems to your profitability, your resilience in business, but also decapitalizing nature at the same time. So in this situation, we have a non-linear variable cost relationship where we have productive variable costs, where these PVCs working with nature between that point there and the inflection point, working with nature, and corrective variable costs, trying to drive production and substituting for nature. So there is, at this MSO, a sweet spot where both nature and business are benefit from each other and are synchronized and are symbiotic. So, what's the effect of that? What does that mean? Well, let's have a look at the managed landscape. Here's a photograph of the Upper Wharfdale being managed for centuries. If we didn't have stock on this sort of land, we would decapitalise our nature and be less profitable as a business. So over the past 400 years, farming has created an almost entirely managed landscape. And because of that, nature has adapted and become in long-term equilibrium, long-term balance with farming. Nature and farming in balance together. So you can argue then that unless there is a commercial farming benefit, there is no true value to natural capital. Unless you can get farming and nature in symbiosis, there's a real problem with decapitalization of nature and a reduction, if not removal, of viable farming. And it doesn't matter whether if you have too few stock. It does matter if you have too few stock. If you have too few stock, the symbiosis disappears. The balance doesn't work. And in the same way, if you have too many stock, the balance is wrong. Both situations need to get to the sweet spot, and at that point, farming and nature are in balance. And we have not had a single farm of the nearly 80 that we've reviewed not showing that. So there is a sweet spot for the farm business and nature, and that understanding is absolutely critical. Free issue. What do I mean by free issue? Well, this free issue is what makes all this work. In farming, grass is provided on a free issue basis by nature. We get free sunshine, free rain, free fertility, free grass. If we didn't get that, we in the hills and in other places would have to buy that in. So by virtue of the cost avoided in purchasing a substitute, the free issue grass that we get from nature makes a significant contribution to the farm profitability. Without free issue, farm businesses would be even less viable and, in fact, in my view, wouldn't survive. Natural capital. So we're on to we've done managed landscapes, we've done MSO, we've done free issue, we're now on to natural capital. In my view, a much ill-defined term in farming. It doesn't yet have the utility it should have. It must have a definable characteristic, it must be quantifiable, and it must fit into accounting conventions. The quantifiable bit, as I understand it, and I haven't yet done a presentation or been in meetings where anybody has disagreed with me, but I can't find any internationally approved methodology which takes a cover-based approach to natural capital and valued it in pound notes. And until we do that, it's really difficult to fit that natural capital into farming, into accounting conventions. And I go on to say that if you can't measure natural capital, it is very difficult for it to demand a revenue stream. And I don't mean measure it in cover, in a cover vegetative way, but in a pound notes way, financial. Nature's bounty. This is what gives the asset. Natural capital gives us the asset to nature's bounty. So we get this free issue, and then from that free issue we can create this natural capital. But it comes in the form of free issue benefits. These benefits have a real value, as we've been talking about. And this suggests that because we get this free issue, courtesy of nature, that we should treat nature as a stakeholder or shareholder in a farm business. If I was investing in somebody's business, I would expect to get a dividend. Nature doesn't ask for that, it just asks to be looked after properly. And so you need to put nature on your balance sheet. I know it's not done at the moment, but we need to bring nature into our business in a way that it currently isn't. And when you do that, philosophically, it changes the attitude to the way we treat it and the way we run our businesses. So it behaves in a contrary way. It doesn't expect a dividend, but it does expect to be looked after. So normally, a normal stakeholder would want dividends, discounts, interest payments. Nature doesn't require that. It requires it to be looked after, stroked gently, and brought onto the kitchen table. Working with somebody in the south of the country, they now have at their kitchen table, when they have a farm business meeting, they have an empty chair with the word nature written on it to remind them of where nature fits into their business. So we've got farm strategies, last two slides. When you're in business, you have to do things that optimize the performance, and in farming there are some sequential and congruent steps. Firstly, in farming you have to maximize and set prices. Farming, you can't do that, really difficult, but what you can do is move your farm business to MSO levels, not have your yield or your stocking rate too high or too low, and you do that by cutting out your corrective variable costs progressively, your fertilizer, your feed, your vet and med, etc. And you want to maximize the benefit impact of natural capital by making sure that you have as much naturally available grass available as possible to your livestock. You need to reduce your fixed costs. We haven't talked about that much, but reducing fixed costs is a huge problem. Fixed costs are a huge problem in farming, and we should be lobbying governments and institutions to develop added value and branded products. So farmers, conservationists, invest time in business planning. If we go to MSO, the farm will be at its most profitable. It will maximize the natural capital, which is what we're trying to do. It will minimize the change imposed on the environment from year to year. It will avoid the purchase of feedstocks and artificial fertilizers, which will have consumed energy in its production and its delivery to farm. So there is this sweet spot that, and I know I keep repeating it, there is this sweet spot between farming and nature. Really important to understand that. But finally, we're also beginning to develop find evidence that when you get stocking rates to MSO, livestock farming will be in a position to deliver not only net zero carbon economy, but a net sub-zero carbon economy. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. That was very well kept to time, and I hope gave a lot of people some food for thought. So now we're going to speak to Gethin. Gethin Owen Farms at Nantharev Isle in North Wales. It's a 150-acre farm, which I'm sure he'll tell you about. He farms beef and sheep, and he also grows a variety of crops. And in 2011, he was the Welsh winner for the Nature of Farming Awards. So he's going to give us 10 minutes on his herbal lays and how he is approaching farming his way out of the climate and ecological emergency. Over to you, Gethin.
Right, diolch, Hilary. Yes, bore da bawb, pleser. Sorry.
We can't see you at the moment.
Oh, Can you see me now? There we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Bore da bawb. Bleser bod yma bore mai siarad efo chi am be dwi'n neud adre. Good morning. The title of my PowerPoint probably suggests that I can give you the answer to one of the biggest questions and biggest challenges that we've got facing us in agriculture at the moment, and I can answer it in 10 minutes. But no, I haven't got all the answers, I'm afraid. There's no way I can give it in 10 minutes. But I'll share with you really what what I've done on my own farm to try and address the changes I've made that have I'm doing my best basically to reverse the collapse in nature and the effects of agricultural and climate change. So so this is home, Nantef Isle, a north-facing 150-acre farm on the North Wales coast by Abergele. Fairly steep, rocky. Of the 150 acres, we can grow crops on a third of it, so about 50 acres. We're got a four-year rotation, so 1 year we're growing spring cereals, and then the other 3 years a fertility building crop in the form of red clover, well, mostly red clover and some herbal leys. So up until about 15 years ago, we were a pretty conventional system, all grass, using quite a bit of fertilizer to get that grass to grow, stocking fairly heavily, and then basically I wasn't happy with the effect that type of agriculture was having on nature, and it wasn't, the figures weren't stacking up either. When you're farming intensively, obviously you need a lot of inputs to sustain it, and the input costs were becoming, eroding the bottom line. Every time a lorry turns up on the yard with a load of straw, a load of feed, a load of fertilizer, all costs money, and it erodes the bottom line. So about 15 years ago, we started this journey of, basically reverting to a more kind of traditional type system, a mixed farming type system. And inadvertently kind of on a mission to look for that MSO sweet spot that Chris mentioned earlier. We reduced sheep numbers and we joined the Tir Gofal scheme, and we started growing cereals again, which we hadn't done for about 40 years. So I like this quote. Thinking about agriculture and the effects on nature. It's something that's we've sort of been in conflict with since we've started farming, really, 5,000 years ago. When you're farming land, it's basically you're banishing all but a tiny handful of chosen species, and we've gone to the extreme as an industry in the last half a century. Up until half a century ago, we were kind of in conflict to some extent, but there was a balance and a lot of nature that you did have on and do have on farmland has evolved to depend on each other. So thinking about what's happened in the last half a century, thinking about what in my part of the world, what's different now to what was being done 50 years ago. These are the sorts of things that I think's happened, in somewhere like here, which is kind of livestock grass-based agriculture. So we've specialised, we've stopped having the variety on farms. Farms have got bigger. There's been an increase in short-term tenure of land, so there hasn't been the incentive to invest and look after the long-term landscape fixtures like hedgerows, and the short-term mentality has been to kind of mine the fertility of that land, because there isn't the long-term security there. We've stopped growing cereals. We've gone specialised growing grass. We're making silage instead of hay. We're spreading slurry instead of farmyard manure. We've basically abandoned our hedgerows, and we're using the flail trimmers, and we're not coppicing and laying like we used to. The CAP, that's driven livestock numbers, and driven up livestock numbers. That's kind of caused overgrazing and that kind of thing. The capital grants that have come out over the years, they've all been towards spending on concrete and steel, really, which has kind of facilitated more industrial type agriculture. And we've become addicted to chemicals. The solution to everything, productivity and controlling pests and diseases and weeds it's always been in a bag or a bottle, as a general rule. And then predators, there's probably been a change in the balance between species of wildlife on our farms. This is my pride and joy: 3 children and my crop of oats. So as I said, we grow about 15 acres of spring oats every year. So basically it's sown in March, and then not sprayed, not fertilized. And then I'm not an arable farmer, I'm not an arable specialist, so I want to sow a crop, shut the gate, and come back in September to harvest it. And spring oats, it's a fairly low input, easy to grow crop, which suits me fine. So I'd say the 15 acres of oats, it probably supports more nature, more wildlife than the rest of the farm combined over the course of the year. So as it's growing, the crop itself, the picture on the right hand side, you've got this canopy of oats, and underneath you've got all sorts of weeds growing in kind of low manageable levels, and that supports all sorts of flora and fauna. And then on the field margins, the field margins have peace and quiet from livestock for a whole year. So you get this tussocky growth around the edges. The hedges have a chance to recover. So while it's growing, it's providing habitat and feed for a lot of nature, really. So as I said, gets harvested in early September, and then the main resource, the most valuable resource for the farm really is the straw. The grains more of a byproduct that we feed it to the cattle just because we've got it, basically. But this year straw's £150 a ton, and when you've got 100 cattle having to be inside over the winter, you need basically large quantities of dry carboniferous material to absorb the muck. So that's the main financial benefit of it, is it's providing that feed and straw, as well as being fabulous for nature. So the stubble over the winter, it's at the minute, we've got a flock of skylarks on it. You've got every winter flock of skylarks move in, and you have hundreds of finch type birds feeding, and that 15 acres of winter stubble, without a doubt, it supports more bird life anyway than all the rest of the farm combined. Yeah, and it's unlike winter cereals that gets plough. You plough the field and sow in October, November. You've got bare soil over the year, but with winter stubbles, you've got the regrowth of the volunteers regrowing, volunteer cereal regrowing, and you get bits of weed and clover growing. So yeah, you've got that cover over the winter that's protecting the soil, soaking up any leftover nutrients, and it's even providing feed the following spring before we plough up the following spring. We'll turn the cattle in February once it's dry to graze off the green growth. So the other 3 years of the rotation, we tend to grow this really, red clover. I'd say this is the engine behind the whole system. This is the one that rebuilds fertility, puts nitrogen back in the soil. So I'm a huge fan of red clover, and it baffles me why there's not more of it being grown in Wales. It's kind of a win-win-win situation in my opinion. It's well, first of all, it's great for the soil. The deep taproot breaks up the soil. It's good for soil structure. It's a soil builder. It fixes up to 200 kilos of nitrogen per hectare per year, basically from fresh air. So it's free fertilizer. And then in terms of its value for nature, it's a fantastic source of pollen and nectar, really. Once a field of red clovers in flower, it's humming with bumblebees and butterflies. And in terms of a feed for the animals, it's without a doubt, it's for grazing ruminants, it outperforms bought-in cereals and soya. You can plough up the Americas to grow soya to feed ruminants, but it's still not as good a feed as red clover, in my opinion. So the animal performance, the animal growth, and the productivity that you get from the red clover, it's unbeatable in my opinion. Then with the grazing land, I'm a big proponent of the mob grazing principle that people like Alan Savory and Joel Salatin kind of preached to the world. And it's in a way, mob grazing of grazing livestock has created some of the biggest carbon sinks on the planet in one way. When you think about the prairies of North America, the pampas in South America, the steppes in Russia, they were created over millennia of having bison and bison mob grazing over the prairies over millennia, and that's been kind of built up the soil and built up the carbon sink over the years. And yeah, I try to follow the same sort of principles at home. There's a lot you can do with spending a few £100 on electric fencing. You can increase productivity from your grassland with fewer inputs, and you're building soil as well, building your carbon sink, as opposed to set stocking. It's pretty detrimental to soil, and it's not as good in terms of productivity. So yeah, mitigating the effects of climate change. Well, I think what can we do? I think some of the issues of the collapse in nature and the effects that agriculture has on climate change, I think we can answer and solve some of a lot of the issues with. You can kill two birds with one stone. Some of the things that you do that can mitigate climate change, the effect of climate change. It's also good for nature. So yeah, these are the kind of things I think that we can do. Yeah, first of all, yeah, probably there's we've got lots of land that's in Wales that's we'd be far better off using it for either nature or storing water and carbon. So whether it's for conservation grazing for nature, or for using land to grow trees, or managing it to increase peat levels. So yeah, probably need to use the less productive land and use it. It's probably got more value for non-food production. Yeah, we need to get rid of the plough. Basically, it's ploughing up land. It's shown to be cause land to release huge amounts of greenhouse gases. So there's lots of people in the arable world using min-till already, but it tends to rely on use of glyphosate, I'd say. So probably we need to be, as an industry, more use more innovation to try and use min-till without having to use glyphosate. Yeah, we need to stop using nitrogen fertilizer. We've got the means to by using a lot of the grain and protein crops that are grown in the world. They're used to feed ruminants, but by using legumes, grassland, we can produce the same amount of animals without the need to grow fertilizer. To use fertilizer. Sorry. Yeah, we need to get rid of industrial livestock systems, and so revert the role of farm animals to being recyclers and restorers. So pigs and poultry, historically they were kind of scavengers and recyclers of waste, whereas now they're in competition with crops grown for human edible crops. And then same with ruminants, huge amount of grain and soya and protein crops being used to feed ruminants, whereas historically, they were used as fertility builders and soil builders and restorers of the land. Yeah, mob grazing, as I said, it's something that most people could kind of try to with grazing livestock could do with relatively little invested in infrastructure. Yeah, shorter supply chains. Our food system, it's based on a long, convoluted, centralized food system. So yeah, we need to get more local. Yeah, we need to be more diverse in what we in the foods that we produce within Wales. There's pockets of land and microclimates within Wales that are perfectly good for growing more fruit and veg. Yeah, so those are my ideas. Yeah, it's a big ask, I think, and the targets that to become carbon neutral and to reverse the decline in nature on Welsh farmland. It's a big ask. It's a huge task, but to achieve those kind of tasks and targets, I think we need to have really ambitious, drastic changes to the way we farm. So yeah, thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thanks very much, Gethin. That's really interesting. It's nice to see it down to earth on a local farm to us. So I'm just going to give 6 minutes or 7 minutes on the Nature Friendly Farming Network Manifesto and the key asks that we've got for politicians of any colour to really help to get lots of farms working together on being the solution to a green recovery. So nature friendly farming can help to tackle the climate and ecological crises, and it can support vibrant rural communities and economies and produce plentiful, healthy, sustainable food and improve public health. But in order to do this, we've got 6 key asks. So I'll just go through them very quickly. With over 80% of Wales being farmland, we need to act now. And hopefully that can ensure that all farmers in Wales can be compliant and have profitable, long-lasting farms. So the first ask is to maintain and redirect payments towards mainstreaming nature-friendly farming. A future agricultural policy can play an important role in tackling the crises, and it can support rural economies and communities. So a new Wales agriculture policy should be centred on public money for public goods that rewards nature-friendly farming and the environmental benefits. And there needs to be enough long-term funding to support farmers in their transition to that and continue to reward public goods production. And we're going to need advice and guidance. That's going to be essential to help farmers during that transition period and beyond. Future schemes should be made accessible to more farmers, so you haven't got little islands of nature-friendly farmers amongst a desert of intensively farmed land. All farmers have got the potential to provide environmental goods and services, and then we can just encourage that without prejudice to any other sector. The shift to that's not just good for wildlife, but it's key to the long-term survival and success of Welsh farming and rural communities. And it will deliver broader benefits to the public, including flood protection, water and air quality, and access to thriving natural landscapes. It's also the most profitable way, as Chris said, of producing food. There's a Nature Means Business report produced by the Nature Friendly Farming Network that you can find links to on our website. Number 2 ask is committing to zero carbon agriculture. Land well managed for nature also stores carbon, as Gethin said, and helps mitigate climate change. So there are simple nature-based solutions like tree planting, improving soil health and encouraging grassland biodiversity, as well as more complex management like peatland restoration that can play a big role in tackling climate change. So we're hoping that Wales's agricultural sector should be net carbon zero by 2040 at the latest, and every farmer can make changes to reduce carbon emissions and store carbon on their farm. All businesses need a baseline carbon audit to provide a broad understanding of the situation and help them to track progress. And they're going to need advice and support across the sector. And it can make economic sense as well, as Gethin said, using legume crops and maize to reduce the need of artificial fertiliser and reducing livestock numbers. That can be a route to increasing profitability. Number 3 ask is maintaining strong environmental and animal welfare standards. This pandemic's been a reminder of our dysfunctional relationship with nature and the environment. And we're concerned that future trade deals could undercut the high standards set by Welsh and UK farmers. So Welsh Government needs to put pressure on the UK Government to commit to high food, environmental and animal welfare standards for trade deals. The future agricultural policy in Wales has got to deliver strong baseline environmental regulations and long-term funding commitment, just so that you've got the time and the confidence to plan your farming system. It's got to enable farmers to produce safe, healthy food whilst helping soil, landscape, rivers and wildlife to recover and flourish. And this baseline should apply to everybody, even those who don't want to engage with environmental land management schemes. Number 4, build markets for nature-friendly farming products. Accreditation schemes can ensure that food produced to high standards is recognised in the market and help deliver environmental, economic and social enhancements. So it would be great to help develop supply chains and markets for nature-friendly food products that help incentivise and reward the sustainable management of natural resources. And there's opportunities to create geographic indicators for products from particular landscapes. There's a clear role for government to be proactive in providing primary producers with a business environment that helps them get a fair return on the market and a fair share of the profit. Number 5, investing in local food systems. So as Gethin said, we need a system that ensures food is affordable rather than cheap. And it's important to look at the whole food and farming system to ensure farmers can get a fair return whilst ensuring healthy food that is affordable and sustainably produced. Government's role should be an enabling role, setting up structures to facilitate a strategic national approach to food, including regulations, local food networks, transparent supply chains, and sustainable public procurement. There's no such thing as local food unless there's local food processing and manufacturing facilities. So hidden costs along the entire supply chains, like high food miles or livestock feed, that drives global deforestation, can mislead consumers. Investment in this area, facilitating local abattoirs and on-farm butchering and manufacturing facilities if there's a demand, is vital to improve the environmental footprint of our supply chains. And finally, number 6, educating on food, farming and nature. They've got to be included in our school and college curriculums, and reconnecting people with farms and their food through school visits and community education and workshops on farms can help to drive change. So we should be supported to engage the public through farm visits. And providing affordable and free food courses can help people understand and make the most of seasonal and local food and generate a market for local nature-friendly produce. And farmers also need educating on the benefits of nature-friendly farming. So people like Farming Connect should place greater emphasis on nature conservation and the business benefits of nature-friendly farming. There's a bit of a disconnect at the moment between customers and farmers and a lack of understanding on what's good or bad for the environment. So we need to educate people where their food comes from and the positive environmental, social and economic impacts of nature-friendly farming systems. So I think nature-friendly farming has got a big role to play in ensuring the green recovery following COVID-19. It can help improve public health, rural economies and communities, as well as tackling the nature and climate crises. And if you want any more information, go and have a look at our website. So I'm going to open up for questions now. Not exactly sure how we're doing this. Do I read them out or what? Okay.
If you look in the presenter chat, Hilary, they've been cut and pasted into there.
Okay, so I just go to the start.
Come in and ask them.
Okay. So
I can hear if it's helpful, Hilary. There's a lot of debate going on, and I definitely won't manage to answer them all. But there's quite a few questions for Chris, and he's been busy answering in the chat as well. But Chris, I think there's the questions around why have ESA schemes not been quite as successful in shifting the model if they worked. Do you want to say a little bit more about that and think about the new schemes ahead of us?
Well, I think there are 3 reasons really, although I've just put 2 in the chat. Firstly, no one has, as I said in my talk, no one has worked out a way to calculate the true value of what ESA schemes bring in the form of natural capital. And because they haven't done that, they've used an income foregone approach. And so no one has understood that there is a symbiosis between farming and business, farming and nature. And there is that sweet spot. And it doesn't matter whether you're overstocked or understocked, you need to be at MSO. And I also repeat that 80 farms have shown exactly the same evidence. So there is this approach to farm support which is invalid because no one has valued what natural capital is. I hope that makes some sort of sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that there's questions here around what does this mean then, and your less is more approach mean for the new post-cap schemes? And do you think we can get MSO as a concept embedded in those new schemes in England and Wales and elsewhere?
So under the current scheme, we as farmers are not providing the public benefit for the public money that we are given. And that's not our fault, it's just the way the system is, and we've taken advantage of that. First point. Second point is, certainly in England, and I guess in Wales too, the amount of BPS that's going to be available is going to be reduced. And there may no longer be BPS, but just an environmental payment of some sort, and it may not reflect the amount of money that we're getting currently. So we have, as farmers, to run our businesses effectively as possible and to give the best value for public money, and to then shout very loudly about that. And the only way to do that, your business is at its best when it's at MSO and the relationship between farming and nature is in symbiosis.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. There are many more questions, and we won't get through them all. I'm going to put one to Gethin, or actually I'm going to cheekily ask Gethin to answer two in one, actually. You've got questions here about what are the main challenges since you've changed how you've been farming, and also a specific question about the potential for your pasture management that can help with reducing winter housing. So maybe that is part of the challenge. I don't know. Over to you, Gethin, and you might need to switch your camera on as well.
Start my webcam. Yeah, like I said, I've replied in the notes. I tried to reply. Yeah, the biggest challenges I'd say is managing the mixed system. There's more stuff going on, more things to organise. Yeah, that's been one of the biggest challenges. I suppose it's trying to coordinate everything, and because you're growing more crops, it's more crops and less acreage of the individual crops as well. Machinery, you need more machines to do the various jobs, and obviously machines are very all farm machinery, it's prohibitively expensive now, so we rely on contractors. So you need to arrange more contractors to come, more visits by the contractors, and because we're working with small acreages, sometimes it's more of a job to get them to come here to do it, because coming here to sow an acre of Swedes, it's some people might think it's not worth the effort for them. So that's been one challenge, and then the other challenge has been weather, the climate. We're not blessed with an east of England climate with half a metre of rain. We've got a metre of rain here, and most of it seems to fall in September and October sometimes. So harvest time can be a bit stressful. Combines have got very huge, and combines don't tend to like narrow lanes and low hanging tree branches, and the harvesting has been a bit of a stress at some years. Some years, if you have a couple of dry days, it's fine. But those are the two main things I'd say.
Brilliant, thank you, Gethin. The chat has really expanded. Lots and lots of questions, and I don't know, we certainly won't have time to answer them all now, unfortunately. But really stimulating talks from Chris, Gethin, and great to hear about the Nature Friendly Farming Network from Hilary, going from strength to strength. And I perhaps should do a bit of a plug for the Nature Friendly Farming Network, because you can support it by being a member even if you're not a farmer, so you can get then updates and emails as the network goes from strength to strength. And for those who we didn't get to answer all your questions today by this route, perhaps if you join the Nature Friendly Farming Network, these are live conversations that happen more regularly, and Hilary and colleagues will be able to help answer questions